You know that feeling, like your brain is a total leaky bucket? You pour all this knowledge in, and it just trickles right out. Well, today, we're going to dive into Make It Stick, The Science of Successful Learning, a book that basically promises to patch those leaks for good. So let's start with a feeling I think we all know way too well. You spend hours, maybe even days, grinding away, studying for a big test. You feel like, okay, I got this. You've got it down. And then, a week later, it's gone. Poof, just vanished from your brain. So what's the deal? Why does this happen? Why is all that hard work so temporary? Well, according to the authors of Make It Stick, the problem isn't actually you. It's your strategy. And here's the core, kind of shocking idea of the whole book. Our most common, our most intuitive study habits, the ones that feel right, they're actually some of the least effective ways to build lasting knowledge. So this is what the book calls the forgetting problem. We put in all this effort, right? But our knowledge, it just feels like it's stored in that same old leaky bucket. And the crazy part is, we're often tricked by our own brains into thinking our methods are working, when really they're just setting us up to forget.
I mean, just think about cramming. It's the classic go-to move for students everywhere, right? That frantic, all-night session, rereading your notes, your textbooks. It feels so productive. And hey, you might even ace the exam the next day. But here's the thing the book points out. Those gains, they're totally temporary. They just melt away. It's a short-term fix for what's really a long-term goal.
All right, so let's zoom in on the biggest culprit, the most popular study strategy of them all, just plain rereading. So why does this method, which feels so natural, so right, actually lead us so wrong?
And the scale of this is just staggering. I mean, surveys show that more than 80% of college students use rereading as their #1 study strategy. It's the default for pretty much everyone. And that means most of us are building our knowledge on our really, really shaky foundation. Okay, so here's why rereading is so incredibly deceptive. As you go over a text again and again and again, it starts to feel easier, right? That feeling of fluency, of familiarity, it's really powerful. Your brain thinks, I know this. But the authors have a name for this. They call it the illusion of knowing. It feels like mastery, but in reality, it's just shallow recognition.
And this is the absolute key distinction right here. Being fluent with the words on the page is not the same thing as mastering the concepts behind them. You're just getting better at recognizing the text. You're not getting better at truly understanding and, recalling the information when it actually counts.
Okay, let's try a quick experiment. This is straight from the book. You've probably seen a US penny thousands, maybe tens of thousands of times in your life. But if I showed you a lineup of a dozen different versions, could you, right now, confidently pick out the one correct design? For most of us, the answer is a really surprising no.
And that penny test? It just perfectly proves the point. Seeing something over and over, what they call mere exposure, it doesn't burn anything into memory. Your brain isn't a sponge. It doesn't just absorb information passively. It has to actively work with it to make it stick.
Okay, so we've kind of torn down all the old, ineffective methods. So the big question is, what do we build in their place? The book offers some incredibly powerful, evidence-based strategies that are all about learning smarter, not just harder. Let's break down 3 of them. First up is something called retrieval practice, and it's actually pretty simple. It's the act of pulling information out of your brain, instead of just trying to cram it in. See, every single time you try to recall something, you're not just checking what you know, you are actually strengthening the memory itself. So yeah, simple things like flashcards, or just quizzing yourself, turns out they're super powerful learning tools. And the data totally backs this up. I mean, check this out. A study in an Illinois middle school found that students who were regularly quizzed on material ended up scoring an A- on their final exam. And the material they only reviewed, they got a C+. That is the power of retrieval in action. We're talking a full letter grade improvement. All right, strategy number 2 is spaced practice. And this is basically the exact opposite of cramming. So instead of one giant marathon session, you spread your learning out over time. And what this does is, it forces your brain to work just a little bit harder to recall the information each time, because you've actually allowed a little bit of forgetting to happen. And that extra effort, that's what locks the memory in for the long haul.
Now for our third strategy, and I gotta warn you, this one might feel the most wrong of all. It's called interleaved and varied practice. What it means is, instead of practicing one thing over and over and over until you master it, blocking, you should actually mix it up with other skills. Now it's gonna feel slower, it's gonna feel harder, but the results are absolutely dramatic.
So, check out this beanbag experiment. You have 2 groups of kids.
Group A practices tossing beanbags into a bucket that's always exactly 3 feet away. Simple enough. Group B, though, they practice at 2 feet and at 4 feet, but never at the 3-foot distance. So when they're both tested on the 3-foot toss, who do you think does better? It was Group B, the group that never practiced at that specific distance. Their varied practice built a way more flexible and adaptable skill.
So what's the common thread here? You've got retrieval, you've got spacing, you've got interleaving. They all share one incredibly powerful unifying principle. They all require effort.
And this quote from the book really just says it all. The core idea is that real, lasting learning has to be effortful. See, when learning feels easy, it's often super superficial. That struggle to recall something or the challenge of mixing up different topics, that's not a sign of failure. That is the feeling of your brain literally building stronger connections.
You know, psychologists have a fantastic name for this whole concept. They call them desirable difficulties. These are the short-term hurdles that make learning feel harder in the moment, but they lead to way, way better long-term retention. It's all about reframing difficulty not as a roadblock, but as the actual pathway to true mastery.
So what this means is you can literally swap out your old, ineffective habits for this brand new toolkit. So instead of rereading, test yourself. Instead of cramming, space it out. And instead of drilling one thing at a time, mix it all up.
Look, if there's one single thing you take away from Make It Stick, it's this. You have to embrace the struggle. That feeling of difficulty, that's not a sign that you're failing. It's a sign that it's working. It's the feeling of knowledge actually sticking in your brain.
And that really leaves us with a final crucial question to think about. We've all been taught to measure learning by the number of hours we put in, right? But what if that's the wrong metric entirely? What if true, lasting knowledge isn't about time at all, but about the quality and the intensity of our effort? Well, that is the science of making it stick.